This video is sponsored by Frontier Developments. The reticulated giraffe can be a tricky animal to build for, but that's what makes it fun. I started this habitat by building the basic outline of the enclosure. There I saw just how tall the giraffes were. This is a shelter I definitely don't want to make too short. Taking the significant height into account, I began creating the giraffe shelter. I didn't exactly have a clear vision on how I wanted this building to look, so I had to play around a bit. Sometimes it's far easier just to throw things down and see how they look. You can always delete them later. I knew that I wanted to use these sandstone pieces since it gave a very arid vibe to the structure, so I went off of that. I also knew that I didn't want to build a giant box for the giraffes to live in. The building would have to have some dimension. It may look like the footprint of the shelter is way too big, and it is, but this was my attempt at making an interesting shape. What I did get right though was the addition of an indoor viewing area. I thought it would be super cool to get a behind-the-scenes look at the giraffes in their enclosure. I tried to work on the rest of this building around that viewing area. As I continued to place pieces and layer on details, I was liking my build less and less. And when I took a big step back and looked at it all together, I was not happy. Yeah, it kind of looked like a fast food restaurant. I think honestly it was just the scale of the whole thing. So I scrapped it and started over. It may seem like I had wasted all that time on the first iteration of the building, but that wasn't true at all. See, I didn't really build anything all that different in the end. I learned what looked good and what looked bad, and I took what I thought worked well and incorporated those things into the final build. For instance, I liked the general shape of everything, it just needed to be smaller. I also really enjoyed the texture of the sandstone, so I made the entire structure out of it. And in this run of building, I was very confident, since I now had a vision for what I wanted the building to look like. I even added some simple but effective custom windows to maximize the viewing into the shelter. And my favorite part of all, the blue tile roof. The bright blue really contrasted well against the monochromatic orange tone that I had going on in the whole habitat. I think this is what really tied everything together. Oh, and of course I had to put a little giraffe sign at the top of the building. Even though the goal of this enclosure was to create a savanna, I didn't want the terrain to be entirely flat. In real life, land has all sorts of bumps and ditches, so I tried to emulate that. A trick that I like to use is to slope the terrain slightly higher at the back of the habitat. That way, if the giraffes go to the back of the habitat, they won't be obstructed by anything in the foreground. Not that they would be easily hidden anyways. While sculpting the terrain, I added a small pond to one side of the habitat so the giraffes could get a drink of water. Excluding the indoor viewing area I built earlier, the entire habitat is surrounded by open-air viewing. And how are we going to keep the giraffes and guests out? A custom barrier, of course. These custom fences can be made really easily. All you need to do is choose a piece that you like the look of, frame it with some wood, in this case I chose round logs with steel braces, and any other pieces that add embellishments. Then you're done. You have your own custom fence. I used mine by copying and pasting the blueprint throughout the edge of the path. Oh, except for this raised viewing area. For that, I used a fence that can be toggled on by enabling fencing on elevated paths. I then created a shade structure out of thatch and used the same wood beams as the ones on my custom fence. If you've ever seen a giraffe at a zoo in real life, you'll probably agree that seeing them at eye level is the coolest thing ever. So of course, I had to add a way to do that into my zoo. The planting and rock work in this habitat may seem simple, but it's actually quite tedious. I have a big open area to fill in, but it can't look empty. It's all about creating a balance. One of the best ways I've found to fill in empty spaces without losing that savanna vibe is to add rocks. Lots and lots of clumps of rocks. You can get all these fun shapes and formations without turning the habitat into a forest. And this wouldn't be a proper savanna enclosure without grass. The buffalo grass is easily one of the most versatile plants in the game. It comes in several colors, which I peppered all over the habitat. I did carve out a little trail with no grass growing, and this led to a shade structure, which I did have to make sure that structure was tall enough for our giraffe friends. I had this really fun idea to put the rubbing pillar enrichment at the base of the shade to get the giraffes to interact with it more. With a few minor adjustments, like touching up the mesh fence at the end of the enclosure, I felt that the giraffe habitat was complete. I really love how this turned out. The giraffes look great against the naturalistic environment, and the raised viewing platform is the perfect way to see them. Even though I didn't know exactly what I wanted from the start, by the end, I couldn't have imagined it differently.